follow, I wanted to tell everyone how incredibly honored I am to accept this Hall of Fame award. And it's even more special being here at the Tommy Burnett courts, which is really awesome. Handball has always been kind of real, more than a game to me. And I just have a couple stories real quick. I'm just hearing these guys talk. As a young program director, many years ago, I decided I always like to have innovative programs. And as you've heard from these guys, I've been into rock climbing, all kinds of different adventure sports. But handball has always been one of my pet programs, something that I really believed in because I felt that handball, in the game of handball, you can develop the values, the life values that will last you a lifetime. And learning to respect yourself, your opponents. When you step foot on that court, there's nobody you can blame but yourself, and there's nobody you can be more proud of than yourself. It's a powerful, powerful thing in handball. But back in the day, I decided, it was about 1980, believe it or not. And, you know, as Bill was saying, I was probably the youngest program director in the history of the YMCA back then. Maybe 10 years old or so. But back in the day, when I started at the Y, you weren't allowed, if you were under 16 years old, you could not be anywhere near the handball courts. And I could never understand that. And so I basically started teaching some of the Y rats, and that's a good term. Those are the kids that are there at the Y all the time. We went down the courts because I love the game of handball. I remember the first back wall kill shot I made that I actually meant to make. But when you're teaching these Y rats handball, needless to say, we got a lot of flack. And the executive director at the time called me into his office about 3 weeks later, and he handed me a sheet of paper with a bunch of signatures on it. And I said, well, what's this? And he says, read it and see what you think. It was a petition to stop our program. And it was signed by about 150 handball and racquetball players. And the reasoning behind it was because back in the 80s, racquetball was booming, handball was booming, courts were hard to get. I mean, we had 12 courts at the Y. And so he asked me what I thought about that, and I said, well, I think it's pretty self-centered of these players, and I think the future of the game are the youth. And furthermore, the values that they can learn playing this game will last them a lifetime. And in days when you had really good leadership at the Y, he turned to me and said, I'm going to back you 100%. So our program went on as I hoped it would. And like Bill was saying, some of the original handball players, I mean, we have kids that are like, one of them's a professor at Colorado State, one's an attorney in Aspen. They're all over the country, and we still stay in contact. And they're up there. They're very close to my age at this time, as I like to think. But when we got our program going, through a gentleman named Bob Peters, who was the executive director of the U.S. Handball, he introduced me to an individual named Vern Roberts. And Vern was a young up-and-coming pro at the time, living in Des Plaines. And Vern used to come to the Y, because we had our program on Saturday afternoons at 4 o'clock, so I didn't want to ruffle any feathers, and that was a dead time at the Y. So Vern would show up every Saturday to help me coach these kids. And it was amazing to have one of the top professionals in the U.S. Handball helping coach the kids. And he did that until he ended up moving to Tucson. But the fun story was that Vern and I were talking, we were saying, you know, we should get these kids to a junior national tournament. And we didn't have the wherewithal to do that, because Vern came up with the idea, why don't we do an adult clinic? We'll have an adult clinic and we'll organize it, and we'll coach the adults, we'll charge them, and it'll be a fundraiser, and we'll raise the money to be able to take these kids, which the tournament was in Memphis, Tennessee, Elvis Land. So we actually did, we filled the clinic with Vern and another gentleman named Tim Sterrett, who was a nationally rated top handball player at the time too, who still is playing handball. And Vern, Tim Sterrett, and I did this clinic. We raised enough money to actually rent a motor coach. And we rented this big, huge motor coach with bathrooms and everything. We took 23 juniors and 13 parents to Memphis, Tennessee for our first national championship at Memphis State University. And from that point on, we haven't missed a junior national championship until COVID hit. So we had a run of about just under 40 years of junior national championships. And these guys have been to so many. We used to actually have shirts where each national championship the kids went to, they got a star on their sleeve of their shirt. And some of the kids have 4 or 5 stars on their shirt, even more. So with that being said, our program grew and grew, and we actually had to go to the Elvis thing because we had so many parents on the trip. But in closing, I just wanted to share that with you because our program goes back so long, and a lot of people don't realize that when you start a program, a lot of times you're going to run into obstacles, you're going to run into problems, and you're going to run into things that you just have to stick to your guns and work out however you can. And so at that point, I'd really like to dedicate this amazing award that I'm unbelievably thrilled with to all the people, the players, and each one of the juniors that I had the privilege of working with. Because I've always been fueled by each one of their enthusiasms. And their enthusiasm has fueled me all these years. So I thank all of them, all of you, everyone involved in handball, because the enthusiasm, it's a sport, like I say, I've been involved in so many different activities, and I love them all, but handball's always been the steadfast one that's never really swayed. So thank you, everybody, and I'm so incredibly honored. Thank you so much.